it all boils down to love and compassion for this child that they so desperately want to bring into the world. So if you were feeling that your judgy pants were starting to creep up, that's okay. I just want you to remind yourself that every parent does this with love, and these choices are impossible choices to be put in front of you. Before we dive into this episode, I want to give you a heads up that we will be talking about some deeply personal and sensitive topics, including miscarriage, infant loss, pregnancy termination, depression, and anxiety. These are heavy subjects, and it's okay if you are not in a place where you are ready to hear them right now. Your well-being is so important, and if this feels like too much for you today, maybe it's not the right time to listen. Please take care of yourself and come back when you feel ready. Welcome back to It's Getting Mom in Here. I'm your host, Kori. If this is your first time here, I am so happy to have you. I might suggest that you pause this episode and head on back to episode 1 in this season. This is a story that is meant to be listened to in sequential order, so it will make a lot more sense if you start from the beginning. That being said, if you listened to episode 1 and you came back for episode 2, thank you. That is so cool. I got a few messages from people that were feeling like they were left on the hook. So I'm looking forward to sharing what happens next. And I also got messages from people who know a bit of the story and what's going to happen and are just so intrigued to hear about the nitty-gritty details of everything. So thank you so much to people that have been messaging me, telling me that they've been enjoying things, and saying that some of the stuff I talked about resonated with them. You can always feel free to send me a message. It's really so special to me that people do want to know the whole story. So we are just going to jump right back into where we left off. We had just met my midwife. So the next thing that has to happen was I actually had to meet her. So the first meeting is just a phone call. And at this point, we were still living at my parents' house, still dealing with the house being up on the market. So I see she's calling me. I'm like running upstairs to my childhood bedroom, close the door, sit on the bed to talk to somebody about being pregnant. And it was just this like feeling of like, oh my God, I'm in my teenage bedroom. My parents are downstairs. I don't want them to hear the call because it's still kind of personal. So it was just a funny moment to have that first phone call in that environment. The very first phone call was really just to get to know each other. She had a few basic health questions for me, questions about where I was at in the pregnancy, and it was a chance for me to ask her a few questions as well. So we talked about my current health situation, and at this point, like I'm in my early 30s, I don't have any major health concerns. I breeze through the questions about me, and then I get a chance to ask her a little bit about her, which is kind of a cool thing that I felt like I had a chance to sort of interview her. And I had 2 questions. I asked her, are you confident delivering babies? And she's like, yeah. And then I asked her, how many babies have you delivered? And she's like, a lot. I'm like, all right, thumbs up. You're the one for me. I wasn't going to be too picky, but just in that phone call, she was so easy to talk to. And I really felt like I just instantly felt comfortable with her. So it was like, I don't need to ask more questions. It feels like the vibe is there. The vibe is clicking. So the conversation was just really straightforward. I didn't have a ton of questions early on, and I didn't have any real health concerns. And the symptoms at the time that I was experiencing were really normal. I think I probably told her that I'm experiencing some fatigue, and at this point, I had some aversions. So I know everyone is so unique with their aversions, but I didn't really have any aversions to food. But I could not handle any sort of hot drink, which was so unfortunate because it was fall and it's like, soup season, PSL season, all these things. I'm like, I just want to cozy up because I'm so tired. I just want to have a little cup of tea, and like black tea, herbal tea, coffee, none of that. My body had no interest in it. So that was my one aversion. Thankfully, I didn't have any aversions to like chocolate or anything. I feel like that one would be really rough. The main thing that we had to discuss was when the first appointment would be. So it's kind of funny that they like almost just take your word for it that you're pregnant. I didn't have to go get any sort of blood work to confirm the pregnancy, but we obviously need to have an ultrasound at some point to confirm the pregnancy and see how far along I am. So we kind of base it on, I know my schedule, I know when my last period was, we have a rough estimate, but we still need to have an official ultrasound. I was lucky that the midwife offered me an early dating scan, so that was at around 8 weeks gestation. And at that point, I was maybe somewhere like 5 or 6 weeks pregnant. So I only had to wait like 2 weeks to have our first scan, which is amazing. I know for myself, that was such an exciting moment that I was just chomping at the bits to get to what felt like that like first big milestone in a pregnancy, that first scan. And I feel like just in pregnancy in general, you're really looking towards what that next milestone is. So maybe it's your first scan, your second scan, getting out of the first trimester and into the second. I just feel like there's these big milestones and they almost help you count down the weeks, because I don't know many people that wanted to be pregnant for longer than 40 weeks. I think we're just also excited to get to that next point, get to the next point. So the exciting thing was that I only had to wait those 2 weeks, and then we were going to have that first scan and get to see our little one. All right, so let's fast forward a little bit for that first ultrasound. And at this point, just because I'm filling you in about the house stuff, our house did sell. It only took 4 days to sell, which was amazing. And we are back in our house, packing things up, getting ready for the move, because we still had a tight timeline to move out of our house and into the other one. So I will keep filling you in on the house stuff. I know some people love hearing about the housing market, so I'll stick that in here and there. So I'm frantic because of all the house stuff, and I feel like garbage because I'm just so fatigued, like the worst fatigue that I have ever experienced, where you just feel like, how was there ever a time that I made it through a whole day without a nap? That just feels surreal at this point. It's just this fatigue like no other. But I have the energy to go to this appointment because, of course, I am excited. Thankfully, we are far enough away from sort of the heat of COVID, so Taylor was able to come with me to this appointment. I really feel for anyone who had to go on their pregnancy journey and was forced not to have their partner or a loved one with them if that was what they wanted. I think that would have been really hard to be told, no, you can't have this other person with you. Taylor works a job that's very flexible, so he was able to take a little bit of time off work and join me. And it was just really just a special moment to get to go do this together. We went to a local ultrasound clinic where they have big TVs on the wall where you can watch. We're just excited. So the ultrasound tech does their first little bit before they turn the TV on. And I'm going into this with like zero fears. At this point, I didn't know very many people that had experienced miscarriages, or at least that had been open about them. There was like 2 of my friends that had shared about their miscarriage journey. So it seemed really sparse that like, absolutely, this wouldn't happen to me. And we didn't miscarry. In this first scan, we are going to see a heartbeat, but it wasn't even on my mind that there would be any issues at this scan or any of the future scans. I was just so blissfully unaware. So the ultrasound tech turns on the TV, says, here's your little peanut, here's the heartbeat. And it was just such a special moment to get to see this little growing being inside of me and be like, this is the little jerk that's sucking away all my energy, but also I love you so much. It was just a really special moment. So that first scan went great. They measured the baby and gave us an estimated due date of around July 12th. I was like, that's great. What a lovely time to have a baby. That's very close to the day that I had predicted that their due date was, based on my cycle, not based on like, me being a psychic. Prediction based on my cycle. And it was just, we left so excited. We went to the car. We had that little grid of ultrasound images. We took photos of that and we sent it to our family. We later would use that photo to share with some people at work. So it was just really special. It was all good. It was a really wonderful first ultrasound experience. And it really just reinforced like, this is great. We are still in our blissful la la land at this point. Nothing can go wrong. Nothing can hurt us. We are 10 out of 10 doing great. Now, at this point, the next scan that's offered to me is at around 12 weeks. This is the early first trimester screening, or EFTS. This scan is optional. For those of you who don't know, I live in Ontario, Canada, and this is something that's offered to us. I don't know how widespread across the country or other countries that this is offered, but for us, this is a free scan that you can opt into where they will do blood work, ultrasound measurements, and compare that data with your age, and they are able to come up with a risk factor for a few chromosomal abnormalities. So the biggest one that people typically hear about is Down syndrome. That is one of the things that they test for. This is optional, and the data is not concrete. So if you're unfamiliar with this scan, essentially they are going to give you a risk score. They're going to say you are either high risk or low risk. You're going to be a 1 in X risk of your child having one of these 3 chromosomal issues. If you are deemed high risk, then you have funding to go on and do additional testing. And the additional tests, there's a few stages, but that's all the way down to an amniocentesis, which will get you very close to like concrete accurate data of yes or no, does your child have these issues? This was offered to us, and we are really thankful that our cousin Laura, the midwife, gave us the advice that we needed to think about what we would do with that information from the scan before actually having the scan. Think about it when you have a clear headspace, a calm headspace. Think hard about what you would do. So we did that, and I'm really glad that she gave us that advice. It's hard when you're already pregnant to think about what you would do if you were to get bad news, because at the same time, you just don't assume it's going to be you that gets the bad news. So Taylor and I sat down and talked about this. We said, if the results of this test were to come back as high risk, how would we feel about that? The first thing you need to think about is, do you even want to have this test or not? If you know that if it comes back high risk, that you would continue on with that pregnancy, maybe you decide you don't want to have that test. You don't even want to know. That could be one choice. In our case, we knew that we at least wanted to get the test, and we knew that if the results came back as high risk, we would follow that path to do more testing. Something for you to know about me is that I am absolutely pro-choice, through and through, 100% pro-choice. Whatever a woman, a mother, a parent, whoever the person carrying that baby, whatever their choice is, that is 100% their business, their choice. And I think a lot goes into the choice to terminate a wanted pregnancy. That's what we're talking about today. We were talking about wanted pregnancies. I think that some people think that it's a really clear-cut thing. After walking the path that we walk with this pregnancy, I have come into a space of really diving into understanding pregnancy terminations and different people's reasons and listening to other people's stories. There's this idea amongst certain people that if a parent terminates a wanted pregnancy because of a congenital issue, that they are just trying to have a perfect baby, that they have no interest in having a baby that has some sort of disability. And that is just so far from the truth. And that is a really hurtful sentiment. I think that sometimes there's this idea that it's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. I just want to have a perfect baby that has no issues. It's so far from the truth. So when Taylor and I were making our decision, things that we were considering were our ability to care for a child with special needs, what that might look like for the two of us, what that would look like for the child, what that would look like for growing our family beyond that child, because we are fairly confident we would like to have more than one living child. And it has nothing to do with this desire to have a perfect family. And it has so much more to do with us and really wanting to make sure that the child that we bring into this world has a good life. I also feel like in this decision making, my background in healthcare has come into play. I have a background as an x-ray technologist, and I worked for a number of years at a children's hospital. I saw a lot of really sick children. So I think for me, there's a realist side of me that comes into this, that I've seen children that have a really, really hard life. And I think at times it can almost be romanticized having a child with a disability. I've heard even some friends of mine who have a child with Down syndrome, that their family members have made comments about just like how extra cute a child with Down syndrome is. And things like that, I think, can really skew people's idea of like, it's also really hard. It's hard for everyone. And if that is not a path that you want to walk as a family or an individual or for your child, you are allowed to make that decision. So on top of that, I also recognize that many, many children are born with disabilities, with chromosomal issues, with different challenges, and they have wonderful quality of life. So it is a heavy decision to think about. You're kind of making a guess of, is your child going to be the one that really has it hard, or are they going to be less on the spectrum of whatever the issue is? There was just so much that had to go into this decision. And I think that advice for us to think about it before we actually had that, those results in front of us, before we even went to the test, was really valuable. Now, I'm just going to pause there for a moment, and I'm going to say, if you were listening to what I was saying and you were just like emphatically disagreeing in your mind, thinking like, nope, no way, people with Down syndrome can have a great life, people with different challenges can have a great life, what's Kori talking about? If you are sitting there disagreeing, I just want you to reflect on those feelings and remind yourself that you absolutely can disagree with me. But this is the time that we all need to recognize in ourselves, if we are like sensing that bias and sensing that like judgment of another parent, you're allowed to listen and say, I wouldn't ever terminate a pregnancy, and Kori clearly would. Yeah, 100%. That's what being pro-choice is that I'm going to make my choice, you can make your choice. But I just want you to recognize that any parent that makes a decision to terminate a pregnancy does so with love. It all boils down to love and compassion for this child that they so desperately want to bring into the world. So if you were feeling that your judgy pants were starting to creep up, that's okay. I just want you to remind yourself that every parent does this with love, and these choices are impossible choices to be put in front of you. And I think that it's something that I could put out a whole episode talking about the right to choose what you do and the nuances of making that decision. But for now, I just wanted to talk about my stance, different things that went into us making the decision, and just putting a little something into the ear of my listeners to remind yourself that these decisions are made with love. All right. So that being said, we knew that if we were to receive high-risk information, that we would go for advanced testing and that we would be open to ending the pregnancy. There is a lot of things that have to happen before you get to that point. A lot of just additional testing, a lot of researching, a lot of asking questions, but we knew at least that ending a pregnancy was in the realm of things that we were comfortable doing in the interest of our family and the life of this child. So we said, yes, we would like to have this early first trimester screening. They set that up. We fast forward a couple weeks. It's in that sort of 12-week mark. There's a really narrow gestational window that you can get this test done. I go to that same ultrasound clinic, I get the measurements, I get the blood work, and the tests are sent off, and it takes a bit of time for the results to come back. At this point, I'm definitely a little nervous to get the results, but at the same time, I'm still in that blissful space where Taylor and I are healthy. These issues don't run in either of our families, so there shouldn't be a reason for me to be concerned. But I would say your concern level goes up just slightly when you recognize that this testing is designed to like tell you the risk and that nobody is exempt from that risk. So we knew we were going to get some amount of risk. We're waiting to get the results from our midwife. And at this point now, we have moved into our new house and we're just trying to get settled. It was a real fixer-upper. Nothing had been updated since the 70s, or I don't know, not quite the 70s. I think they had maybe put in a new shag carpet in the 90s. So there was some work to be done. I'm still exhausted from being pregnant, but we had moved in and we were definitely of the age that we shouldn't have been asking our friends to help us move, but we did it anyways. So you know who you are. Thanks for helping us move in. I don't even think we gave you pizza and beer. We're really lucky to have such good friends. Next time we'll hire movers. We're in the new house, anxiously awaiting the phone call from the midwife, and the day we get the call, she tells me that we did great. We had a very, very low risk score. I think it was 1 in 10,000. It was one of the lowest risks she's ever seen. And I'm like, yes, I'm so competitive. I'm an A+ student. If there's a test, I want to win. Can you win at a test? I was so excited to hear that. And it was great. We don't have to worry about that big conversation of potentially terminating a pregnancy. I was glad we had it. But at this point, we're low risk. Baby's looking great. We're past that first trimester. So, we're in the clear, right? Right? Or so I thought. Now that we were past that first trimester, we felt like we were comfortable to share with our close friends, sort of start trickling that information out. This is an interesting topic to me too, that if you were to Google, when should I tell people that I'm pregnant? A lot of information will say, people often will wait until they're out of the first trimester because the risk of miscarriage is significantly lower and yada, yada, yada. And that discourse really bothers me in the way that there just shouldn't be advice. I guess I'm about to just give advice about it, but there shouldn't be advice suggesting when people should tell a friend or a family member or whoever that they're pregnant. And I think that by continuing to emphasize that making it out of the first trimester is the safe space, that is pulling these blinders over pregnant people to think that you are safe. And you're not. The whole pregnancy, there is a risk the whole time, all the way up until you deliver that baby. There's so much risk that just isn't talked about. And I think I had been fed this information that, well, if you make it out of your first trimester, the risk of losing the baby, that just doesn't happen. You just don't lose a baby after that. You lose a baby at week 8 and then you're fine after that. And that's just so false. I think all along with this journey, I think that one of the hardest things is that I felt like the wool was pulled over my eyes, and information about truthfully all the risks that can occur in a pregnancy. I was so unaware of them, which is shocking for how involved in the healthcare system I am, and how that is what my bachelor's degree is all about, is healthcare and health promotion and health education. And I'm sitting here feeling so uneducated. Anyways, you will come to see as the story continues why I felt like the wool was pulled over my eyes. So in our conversations with the midwife, it was important for us to note that my husband Taylor was born with a congenital heart defect. He was born with atrial septal defect and ventricular septal defect. So the septum is the vertical line that separates the top 2 and the bottom 2 quadrants of the heart. He had holes in both of those. One of those holes closed on its own. The other one needed surgery when he was 3 years old. We shared this with our midwife. She wasn't super concerned. The risk of passing down a heart defect is not very high, but it was definitely enough for her to qualify us to get a fetal echocardiogram. This is basically an ultrasound of the baby's heart in utero. This is not something that our midwife is able to order. She's not able to put in a requisition for this. It has to be a physician. To do that, she had to refer us to a maternal fetal medicine specialist, so an MFM. That is how I will refer to him in the story. She had somebody that she often sends patients to. It's at the local hospital. It's at the hospital where we were planning to give birth. She really spoke highly of him. She said that she had worked a lot with him, and he has a really good understanding of the midwifery role in labor and delivery and in the pregnancy journey. And he was just a really good person to have in our corner. We were like, great, yep, pass on our phone number. He would be giving us a call to set up that scan. We get a call from our MFM a couple days later. Again, it's just sharing the history. He is like so nice to talk to on the phone, really great person. We, again, catch a great vibe from him. He's also not overly concerned about there being any congenital heart defects in this baby based on what Taylor had. Any pregnancy, there's about a 1% chance that the baby will be born with a heart defect. So that is the highest birth defect. That's the most common birth defect in babies. But a lot of that also has to do with it being such a vast spectrum of what a heart defect can be. So Taylor had a very small heart defect, but it can go all the way to really bad stuff. So where Taylor was on the spectrum, there just wasn't much concern because his wasn't anything like genetic or passed down from a family member. The concern levels were relatively low. So the MFM books the appointment for us 2 days after our anatomy scan. And the intent here was because of Taylor's heart history, we were maybe at like a 2 to 3% risk of heart defects. The echocardiogram was really meant to be just precautionary, just to rule things out. The intent was that we would get this scan, the results would go to the MFM and our midwife. We would get the green check mark, everything looks good, and then we would be discharged from the MFM's care and potentially never actually meet him. So spoiler alert, he comes back in this story. If we look ahead, it's now time for us to have the anatomy scan. This is a scan that I'm really looking forward to. You get to see the baby looking like a baby at this point. You get to see their toes and their fingers and their face and their reproductive organs if you want, which we did not. We wanted to keep the sex of the baby a surprise. We went to the same ultrasound clinic as we did last time. Taylor was able to come. They have that big screen on and they're showing us all the parts of the baby, and I'm asking all kinds of questions, and Taylor makes fun of me, but every time we're at any sort of ultrasound or medical imaging appointment, I always tell the technologist that I'm an X-ray technologist, you know, I'm in the medical imaging field too. And he just makes fun that it's like, without a doubt, I will always tell the person that I understand this too, as if we're like in the same club. But part of it is so that they know that when I'm asking questions, I recognize that they can't tell me any sort of diagnosis answer. I'm more so just like, I don't fully understand ultrasound imaging. So I'm like, oh, is that like a femur or a tibia? Like, what part of the leg are we looking at here? And I feel like it makes me feel more comfortable. I find that the tech is a little bit more comfortable chatting back with me about things. I just have so many positive memories from this scan. We were seeing the baby open and close its mouth. We were seeing the baby roll and move. You could start to see their little face. And it was just like a really lovely scan. Something that I will always remember. So in this scan, they're looking pretty in depth. They're looking at all of the baby's bones. They're looking at certain organs. They're making sure things are in the right place. And they look at the heart for a little bit. This is not an in-depth scan of the heart. They're looking just generally at the structure. And I'm watching, and with my medical imaging background, the heart is something that I do have some familiarity with in terms of ultrasound, but not enough that I'm confident at what I'm looking at. I do remember looking at this scan, looking at the images of the heart and just thinking, it looks really open. And that was it. It was like a fleeting thought, but I just remember thinking it looks very open. We finished the scan. They send us on our way. So to me, I'm sort of like, okay, if there were any major issues, they would have grabbed a radiologist to review the images and talk to us, but that didn't happen. So another check mark. We leave with another grid of updated photos to share with everyone. And again, we're still in this blissful, nothing could go wrong space. We're just on such a high. Now, later that day, I remember so clearly this week of my life. So it's a Tuesday. We have the scan. Later that evening, we get a phone call. It's from our secondary midwife. If you are not familiar with midwives, typically you have your main midwife and then you will have one or two midwives that cover for if your midwife is away or if she's on call or if she's at a delivery. We hadn't even met our secondary midwife yet. She calls and I sort of just think, oh, this is just like a check-in call for her to, I don't know, introduce herself and maybe say hello or something. I don't know. I don't know what I thought. She says, hi, it's the midwife. Nice to meet you. Asks how I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. She says, oh, this is great. I can see that you've already got the echo booked for Thursday. I'm glad they were able to get you in so soon so they can look at the stuff they saw in today's ultrasound. And I think, no, this has been booked for a while. The MFM booked it with us. And she kind of pauses. And I said, this scan was just meant to be to rule out any issues. It was more of a precautionary scan. Like, what are you talking about? And I can tell she's kind of confused and she pauses. And I said, yeah, like, because my husband Taylor, he was born with a heart defect. They already booked this echo. So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, she just needs to be a little bit caught up since she's the secondary midwife. She doesn't know my file as well. So I'm explaining to her, like, no, this was already booked. And there's just a bit of silence. And she says, has anyone gone over the results of the scan with you? And I said, no. She goes, okay, I think I need to read the results. And I can just feel myself. I can still like sense that feeling of like, what are you getting at here? So I waved Taylor into the room. I put the midwife on speaker and she reads everything. She's going through it. Says, baby's this long, estimated weight, their head circumference, 2 kidneys, 1 liver, bowels look good. Then she gets to the heart. And I can still just picture myself sitting on the couch in our living room when she's saying this. And I'm looking at Taylor and you feel an instant shift of your emotions of, okay, what is she about to say? The report said something along the lines of, it's a little unclear where the ventricular septum was. They weren't getting a good visualization of the right and the left ventricles. This is the bottom half of the heart, the bottom 2 quadrants. They were also having a hard time visualizing the aorta. So the aorta is the main vessel that branches off the top of the heart. You often see the arch, the aortic arch that comes off of it. So they were having a hard time visualizing the aorta. And what they could see of the aortic arch was looking small. And so she's reading all of this. And I'm confused because it doesn't sound great, but it also is unclear and doesn't sound awful. The midwife sort of says, okay, just take a breath. This is something that they need to look in further. So there's no sense getting too worked up at this point. But in the back of my head, I know that these technologists, they're really experienced with getting these images, and the radiologists, they're really experienced with reading them, and big mistakes don't often happen. So I knew that we weren't going to end up getting news that everything was fine. We knew that there was going to be something. And I shared with some friends at work because the next day went back to work and they asked, how was the scan and everything? And it was like, honestly, like not great. Here's what happened. And it felt like talking again, as if I was like putting this into those forums where people are just going to like tell you, oh, no, like I had an ultrasound and they saw like a shadow on the heart and it was totally fine. They made a mistake and blah, blah, blah. But I just knew like, no, I don't think there's a mistake going on here. Like there's something, and I just have to wait until Thursday. And this was like the biggest wait of my life. This is the longest that a human could possibly have to wait for something, like a day and a half. But we were just so lucky that since we did already have that appointment booked, that's all we had to wait. But even that was like too long. It was like working at the hospital. I wanted to just like march on down to the ultrasound unit and be like, somebody give me an ultrasound right now. Thursday does come. The appointment is late morning. Taylor and I go in together, and this scan feels different. The excitement isn't the same. We know that at this point, we are looking for an issue. Whereas all the scans before that, it felt like we were just looking at the baby. We were just looking at cute little pictures of the baby, making sure the baby's happy, not intently looking for things that are wrong. I'm all worked up about this information. I'm all worked up watching this scan and just thinking like, man, the heart is not something that you want to hear there's an issue with. The heart is such an important organ. And like, not that you want to hear there's anything wrong with any of the organs, but man, the heart, that is up there. The tech is doing the scan. He is very experienced. It's what he does best. It's a specialized tech that does these fetal echoes. And of course, he can't say anything. And I'm not overly interested at this point in having a conversation with him because of the headspace I'm in. And I can remember saying to Taylor during the scan, looking at the baby still rolling around and flipping and everything. And I said to Taylor, oh, this baby's going to be an athlete. It's so hard for me to think about that now. Like, it's almost sickening to me that I said that and the ultrasound tech is sitting there knowing so much more than what I know at this point. And I hate, again, that feeling of like having the wool pulled over your eyes, that like feeling like people aren't telling you things. And I mean, in that situation, he can't tell me things. It really just adds to the whole blindsided of what's happening, that I still had some hope. I knew there was going to be an issue, but I had hope that it's just going to be like what Taylor had, and we're going to work through that. We finish that scan, we go home, and now it's again this like awful waiting game, waiting to get the results of the test. I can so clearly remember I'm sitting at the dining room table. I can picture what chair I was sitting in. I was working from home. I see that we're getting a phone call from the hospital. So I wave Taylor over. We pick up the phone, and it's the MFM. And he's like, okay, we have some preliminary results of the echo. He wanted to call us as soon as he received those preliminary results. He actually told us that the radiologist reading called him. And when I heard that, it was like, that's not good. The radiologist doesn't call people. He reports it and then he submits it to them. If you're getting a call from a radiologist, it's not great. It was preliminary results, but at this point, they knew enough information that they could share with us. I can so clearly remember the MFM saying, so they do see some issues with the heart, and it looks to be incompatible with life. I would like to stop there for today because things are going to really get heavy in the upcoming episodes, and I want to give all of those moments the time that they deserve and the time that I need to give them. As much as this is a story that lives with me every single day, it's not a story that I open up the chapters to every day. So there's definitely some pieces of the story that I keep close and tucked away so that I can function day to day. I also think that there's something poetic about me leaving it with those words, incompatible with life, because in that moment, that's where our world stopped. And I had to sit with those words. So it feels right to just end it there. And next week, we will pick up with what happens after that. Again, thank you so much for joining and listening to this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. And I hope that you are looking forward to the next episode. Things are going to continue to get emotional and interesting. We are going to talk about some of the hard topics like we talked about today, like pregnancy termination. So I hope you will continue to tune in to the next episode. And I hope that this piqued your curiosity into what somebody goes through when they're making these sort of decisions. And that being said, I'm really putting myself into this vulnerable position of sharing some really taboo, under talked about topics. So I really hope that you're listening with an open heart and an open mind. and just listening to the thought process of another person that might be different than your own. If you have any questions about this episode or things that are coming up in this season and you want to reach out to me, you can send me a message. My inbox is always open. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at It's Getting Mom in Here. You can reach out to me through my website, itsgettingmominhere.com or .ca. And you can always email me, info@itsgettingmominhere.com. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so thrilled if you gave me a review, a rating, whatever you would like. And as always, please share this with a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to get a podcast out into the ears of the people who want to hear it. So please share this with somebody who might enjoy it. That's all for today. We'll see you next time.